Let's talk herd.
So I let it go, and I didn't look at his eye anymore, and I didn't even want to. It completely left my head. And about 6 months later, one day he was standing next to me, and I just happened to look into that same eye, and it just was just so clear and deep, like this big pool. And it all came back to me, and it was like the eye was speaking to me. It's like the eye was saying, look at the clarity.
So amazing.
Everything is in its place. Everything is in its place.
That's fantastic.
And that was beautiful.
And what was your journey like with his request and your request, like of yourself, to discover the world?
You mean the journey in realizing it?
Yeah, like how did that manifest?
Oh wow, well that was amazing. Because it totally moved me into my huge vulnerable zone, like, and I just, I've spent 10 years trying to do this, Cami. It's a long time, and I've found all the ruses possible not to do it. Like, to justify why I'm not doing it. Oh, well, it's not time, or I need to do this, and no. So, but then Kumara, he was like, well, now.
Yeah.
No more excuses. So the way it happened was that I knew that whatever happened, I just needed to be with him. And I discovered that just being with him, as long as I stayed anchored in us being, wherever it was, whenever it was, whatever the conditions, whether I was happy or sad, whether he was scared or confident, none of that mattered. The only thing that matters is that you are together. So the very first day, I tacked him up and I said to him, well, let's go and hang out. You've got a saddle on your back, but to be perfectly honest, I have no idea if I'm going to be on your back or next to you. I don't even know where we're going. It was amazing. And that was so liberating. That was so liberating. And I was able to come totally into my heart. And I had no pressure from my mind. I had no objectives. And I was completely in his zone. At that moment when I let go of my objectives and I was in my heart, we were together. And I know now, I know how to be together with him is for me to do that. And so over the next 2 weeks, each time I was with him and we went out, by being in that heart space and by welcoming the vulnerability. So, for example, by saying to myself, oh my goodness, my heart's racing, it allowed me to respond to that and to be kind to myself and to be kind to him. So when I could feel that he was tense, there was so much love and gentleness and kindness. It was like this bubble around us. And that we knew that we were together to live that kind presence, to respond to whatever was coming up in the heart. And what that did was, in responding to these just moment by moment, anything that was coming up, and to say, well, what would make me feel better in this precise moment? Is it taking a step back? Is it lowering my head? Is it just standing still? And over the next 2 weeks, I was living in such a fluidity. We were like in a river, that was gently carrying us, and I felt that we were floating forwards.
Wow.
Barriers just opened up. They just didn't exist anymore.
Mm.
And all I could see in front of us was this flow that we were invited, like doors opening, and we were just being invited to go through. Oh, come through this door. Oh, come
Mm.
through this door. Oh, there's another one. Go through this one now. And these doors were just opening up before us. One door at a time, just one door at a time. So I had no plan. And it was a gift. These doors opening, it was a gift. And the way I feel about it now was that these doors were there opening for us. It was a real, it's one of these moments where you see and feel something so
Yeah.
clearly, but finding the words is so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel it.
It was
Yeah.
like our presence together and the intensity of that presence, the purity
Mm.
of that presence created the door
Yes.
which opened before us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so amazing.
And it was without effort.
Yeah.
Like everything was so easy.
Mm. It's like another
Yeah, so
dimension.
that's the story.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just so much in that story. There's so much that because it's almost like the perfect description or the perfect structure. Because it's almost like it feels for me like, in a way, being here is about becoming, I try and use different words, but like becoming a sort of an expression of source, but like through
Yes.
the awakening, a bit like that portal you're talking about. Like it's like when you kind of get into a certain merge of consciousness, you open up a new world in that. And so it's like when
Yes.
when you did that, relinquishing the control of his eye condition, it's like what it did was just allow him to be able to receive the full like interdimensional 100 sort of 360 degrees of source. Like he was just able to bathe in source. And because of that, because you weren't limiting his reception, like his ability to receive, he could just like, it's almost like that then crystallized the pathway for you both. Because what's so amazing about it is that it wasn't healing his eye, really. It was healing your relationship, because your relationship had become sort of stuck. Like it wasn't really doing what it had kind of come together to do, because you were doing this discovery together. And so this was the way to like initiate that whole mutual healing. And it's just so fantastic, because I think if you're not able to allow the source, like that crystallization process to happen, which is where the whatever it is, like when it came to you, I have to ask why it's here, like why is it expressing itself in his eye as this condition. Like when you allow that meaning. So I think that goes back to my being triggered by this, just our refusal to see that there's a meaning, because the meaning is so fundamental. And it's not like that important in itself. Like it's not the same as identifying with an illness and, all of that stuff, which is just kind of like ego confusion. It's like that. The meaning is the doorway, isn't it? The meaning is it's the kind of, this is where we start. And it was just so clear, because I think it wouldn't have happened. Like you wouldn't probably have discovered that with him if it hadn't happened in that way. Because this was something that,
exactly.
for you, it was it's something that we consider serious, because I think to us, sight is like, often we can't really conceive of not having sight as one of our senses. So it's a big deal. So it had to be like, it was just so perfectly constructed, like as if somebody had sat down and thought it all out, which is kind of the universe. It's how it works.
Right.
Like but it doesn't work in that way. It works in this kind of way of like, I always think of it like as if a room filled up with balls, and all of the balls like are filling in all the space. So they're in the perfect place for, I mean, that's a bit of a weird analogy, but it's like life always does the most perfect thing to encourage the most perfect outcome, which is what happened. And I don't think it matters, because I think a lot of the time we probably miss a lot. Like, we don't do that. We're not able to let go, and we're not able to allow this, and we're not able to and we're not able to listen or even think of it in that way. But that doesn't matter, because that's still part of the whole perfection, because each one's bringing us that little bit closer to being able to do that, and and being able to just get to that place.
And that's what's interesting, is that we can say that when we miss it, this perfection you're talking about, because we miss so much. I think it's so perfect that we can't even imagine the precision, this kind of delicate precision. It's and what's interesting is that these moments where we fall off, or where we miss it, or we don't quite get it, that's part of the perfection.
Exactly. Because it's almost like, I always think of, it's like, say we are a bit like, our limitations are like a kind of lump of wood or fibrous material, and it's like every time we experience an opportunity like that, it softens us just a little bit more, and it just brings us a bit closer. So by the time that it all comes together, or that we're able to allow it all to come together, we're perfectly ready. So it's like there's no real missed opportunity, because every opportunity is giving us that become, like, it's changing who we are, essentially, like making us more.
Totally,
Because you had to be ready to do that with him, so each phase had to be perfectly coordinated, and I think, I don't know, I've just got this kind of, I've always just had this almost like inherent acceptance or belief that everything is perfectly worked out. It's like, it's not even in a mental thing. It's not even on the mental level. It can't not be, because that's what like consciousness is. That's what God is. It's not able to be otherwise, because it's like, I don't know how to describe it any better than that, but it's like, there's no, like, there can't be mistakes, because it's like we're full. It's like consciousness is a full expression of itself, so it can't be wrong. Does that make sense? It's like,
totally,
and it's just, but
it's like there is no lack.
Yeah.
Lack does not exist. There is only abundance.
And full. And I think often because we are sometimes in our mental, like in our mental awareness of things, we see things in a really one-dimensional way. So we're like missing out on
Yeah.
that whole. It always makes me think of riding horses, and that horses that there were. If a horse has been ridden in a certain way, they're so one-dimensional feeling. They just feel like there's like no. They just move in this. I mean, it's kind of based on physical stiffness, I suppose, but it's like a sort of all of the potential has been squashed into this one way of moving. And it just feels so dense and so suffocated, just like kind of awful feeling. And I think you don't really realize that until you felt the opposite, which is like this, a bit like what you were describing with your doorways opening up. It's like this potential, like where just literally anything could happen right now. It's almost like they feel like they could fly if they wanted to. And there's that different. I think that's why I've become a little bit obsessed by moving away from structuring, because any form of structure in writing seems to like shut down the potential. And I think we're all on a different path with that. But it's the same with it's the same with your mind, isn't it? With the way that we perceive the world.
Yeah, the word format comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's like we can quite easily have a format approach to so many things. Was it not so long ago, there was someone who said that they didn't like the word definition because by even the word definition is so limiting.
Yeah.
To define anything is so limiting. Even define finite, it makes it finite, where actually what we're aspiring to is the infinite.
Yes. And I suppose that the counter.
So
No, carry on. I was just thinking that.
I was going to say is
It's that lag. You go. I'll be quiet.
yeah. I was just thinking, so is our challenge about living with no definition, living each moment without having to define.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, yeah. That's why I think we're so keen on the format and the definition, because like we think that there's no way to live. Like, say, take it in terms of a horse, like we just make that assumption right off the bat that there's no way of riding without control. If we can't control the horse, we can't ride. And that's it, and that's like the box that we're working in. So every form of training and connection and communication in that box has to be about control. It just has to. So if you like change the box and you say, well, maybe we don't need to, maybe we can sort of change the basis that we do it. So it's not about, and then you get into spontaneity, and like you have to be able to receive and not know what's going to happen, and not actually do, like not have to have a format. And I think that's when you come into that place where you're actually recreating reality, because I mean, I love to think about this, but this thing about how we've created the reality that we sort of understand as being reality, because we've thought these thoughts over and over and over again, and it's become this physical manifestation of our thoughts. So I think you can only start to recreate that world when you stop thinking those thoughts, like, and you start to say, okay, and it's like what you were saying at the beginning, you come back to that place, that kind of blankness or non-doing place. And whether it takes hours or moments, it's like a place of germination. It's like a place where there is no thought. And then I think you're allowing like a new possibility to just kind of blossom inside you. And you're like, and of course you can't get there by fighting thought. You have to do it just by, I think, being inspired by potential, I think, and like letting go of any kind of agenda. And I think that just takes time, doesn't it? Like even the agenda of your spiritual awakening and your, you know, your journey with your horse and you know, all of these things. You have to be prepared.
That's a really interesting question, though, is how can we help ourselves get into that zone where we're inspired to let go of format and let go of agenda and just be. And when I try to remember the various times where I've been inspired to that, and I think that each time I allow my attention to be drawn to something beautiful and something really that I can feel. So, for example, I've got a lovely tree in front of me. And recently I've felt the energy of the trees more and more, and I can really feel the essence and the kind of this noble thing they've got going on. Yeah. And it's true that if I allow myself again and again to repose, is that an English word? To rest myself in the contemplation of this beautiful thing. Yeah. So that can be a tree, or it can be a horse. It can be a hoof I'm holding in my hand. And I think maybe for me, that really helped me. That beauty, contemplating that beauty, then brought it inside me. And feeling that beauty inside me then gave me the courage to let go of format, because of course in that type of beauty there is no format, there's no time, there's no thinking, there's no agenda. Yeah.
It's coherence.
And I think maybe we all have that. We all have these things that touch us deeply, that beauty where we just feel so light and we're not thinking and we're not planning. And I think maybe that can be one of the gateways to expanding that and living it. Yeah.
And I don't think it's that you're bringing it inside you. I think it's already there. It's like it lights up inside you. You know, like that thing with the Lord of the Rings and all the fires just light up. I mean, I suppose they were lit by somebody, but it's a bit like that. It lights up the beauty in you.
I've got a really good analogy. So if you take a musical instrument, especially a violin, and it's got its strings on it and it's just hanging on the wall. Right. Well, if you strike a note in the room without touching the violin will sing.
That's amazing.
Not just that note. It will sing other notes all around it. It will vibrate all of its potential.
That is amazing. It's exactly that, isn't it? It's the coherence that's like picking itself up, like, wow. That's like a sort of real life manifestation of that energy. Yeah, I remember reading something about looking at flowers, like meditating with flowers and just seeing the beauty and how that was so powerful. And that's exactly what you're saying. But yeah, I think that really is
Yes.
such a strong way into that. And
what I've noticed as well is that if we allow ourselves to go into that contemplation and feel that beauty and feel it within, in my experience, it starts with specific things, and then that capacity to feel that beauty and to notice it grows, and you start seeing beauty in everything.
Yeah, because it is in everything.
So you can start small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something about, there's maybe a more bland way of getting into it as well that came to me. Like there's something about the nothingness. You know, like if you feel like you're just sort of blank and you just don't feel like you can feel anything. Especially if you're not that attuned to doing that kind of like inner work, and you just feel like I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
all of this is about. I don't feel anything. But if you can just feel the nothingness and almost get to know, like get to sort of feel it as a thing in itself. Like it's got a texture and it's got a color and it's got and that, it's almost like that is like a kind of meniscus or a kind of like a membrane. And as soon as you become aware of it as an energy, as a vibration or anything, then it just sort of will lead you into potential. It kind of reveals.
Yes.
It's a bit like seeing the clouds in front of the sun, and as soon as you see them and feel them, they just sort of dissolve. So it's quite similar to the beauty, but it's maybe like if you start maybe a step back, if you're not able to appreciate beauty, because for whatever reason, but you can feel that nothingness.
Well, the thing is, I think each person has at least one thing that they have found beautiful beyond words. It can be a beach.
Yeah.
And usually when you ask someone, can you think of a place or something that you did and you just felt so good? Usually people can find that because we are made to vibrate in that. So yeah, it's there, isn't it?
Yeah. It feels like it just made me think of it feels like the direct and the indirect technique again. Like in craniosacral therapy, there's these two techniques of working, and like indirect is the one where you kind of take up the leverage or the slack, like the resistance. You engage in a way with the resistance, and that kind of kicks in the cranial mechanism or the kind of the movement in that way, because you're sort of taking up that slack, and the other way, the direct technique, is more where you just, what you're talking about, and you would do that more with babies or where there isn't really any resistance. So you just like going into the flow, like straight away into that beautiful flow. So it's kind of like, yeah, there's like those two ways of really doing the same thing. So it was kind of fascinated me, like the relevance of the two ways, and when you use one and because it's a bit like talking about sort of psychology and how people can get healing out of talking about what's bothering them, and then But other people say, well, that actually is just reliving the trauma and it's not. So I think it's, there's times for the different ways. Because there's,
Sure.
that way of always making your thoughts better and everything. And I would say most of the time that's really powerful, but there are times that it just doesn't work. Like you just can't get through the darkness. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. And before we were talking about, how everything has a value, and I understand why we would want to go from one technique to another, its opposite, because this contrast is, we need it. So we can't always just go straight into the energy flow. We also need to understand and to feel what lack of energy is. How does that feel like in our body? And because it's that contrast that creates the momentum, isn't it? So it's really important, yeah.
And there's always this thing that I tend to feel from the horses of becoming more, of bringing more space, like not fixating, because there's that danger of that when you see the limitations, whether it's in yourself or in others, like when you see the limitations, you're locked into them. So you then can't see the light, which is so it's almost like if you have more space, like if you just create more space, then you see the whole more. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't see limitations, but you're feeling into the whole picture, like how everything's moving together. And so in a way you're kind of getting that flow, and you're just, there's sort of, I always feel like there's more to it, that more to kind of understand about that thing. I do think that horses are kind of master healers. They're master, yeah, that was the other thing, interestingly, that this guy, this nuclear physicist, said without any doubt that he believes that we are different from animals. And I can't even remember why this came up, why it was relevant. But we are different from animals because they have no concept of time. And we have a concept of time. And that separates us from them. And that's really interesting for to think about at the moment, because actually that is not true. And I mean, I never did think, well, I don't believe that's true just because of my own experience, but I wouldn't have been able to really prove that. But the people who've got these buttons with animals are actually proving it in a scientific way. Especially there's one cat, and she will say that she wants pets or she wants something, but she wants it later. And she'll stick to that.
Oh.
She sticks to it.
Wow.
Or she wants it tomorrow, and she'll stick to it. So it's like, yes, they do have a concept of time. And I think that opens up a whole thing. I don't really know if it's relevant to what we're talking about now. It would help if I could remember why they talked about that. But it's kind of been on my mind because I'm like, you can't just say things like that when you don't know. And I think that's another.
Yeah.
But it's that format thing again. When we're in a format.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that I do it as well. And I'm like, I want to become aware of all of the things that I just assume are true because we've always thought them, and there's so much, isn't there? It's in a way, it's our whole existence is based on those assumptions.
Oh yes, so much. And what's interesting is that when we're based in these formats and assumptions, when someone else has formats and assumptions that do not correspond to ours, that can create huge discomfort, can't it?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I find it interesting to see that in me. Like, why does that bother me so? Why does it bother me? Like, like I think, oh well, it's because this is a podcast that a lot of people listen to, and they're all just like believing that. But why does that matter? And anyway, maybe they're not believing it. Why does that kind of?
Yeah.
So that's something in me, I think. I mean, it's probably just having an identity with that, and like that kind of element of, I think when we get too identified with what we sort of know and what we care about and what we believe in, and we think that that is important when it's kind of not really that important.
Yeah, it's subtle, that, isn't it? It's subtle, very subtle, because as I was able with Kumara to completely let go and to allow him to choose. But I know that what gave me the courage to do that was the wisdom that he has and the consciousness, the level of consciousness that he has. So when I say to myself, so are you going to be able to do that with some humans? And it's so much more difficult for me because my brain suggests to me that they don't have the level of consciousness that Kumara has. So it's like I can't trust them. So then when I go a step further, I'm like, oh, right, so you can't trust them. So hold on. Do you believe that everything in Source is perfectly designed or not? So that means that humans that may or may not have a certain level of consciousness, they are perfect, as Kumara is perfect. So there's your challenge, Joe.
Yeah. And it's also like, maybe if you allow that they have that, they will have that, because ultimately they do, because we all do. And but if we don't believe that it's possible, so I think that's often what we come up against, because we're so sort of fighting against other people's opinions that we don't allow them in our own mind, which is the collective anyway. We don't allow them to change. It's almost like we need them to think like that so that we can support our contrasting like belief system. So if you take that away and you think, well, they're quite able to change, like they don't even need to, but they've got the capacity to understand the truth as much as I do, like we've all got that capacity. Then that just gets exactly what you did with Kumara. You allowed it to be, you allowed it to crystallize and to happen.
Yeah.
When I think of doing that, it feels like just like faith, like that certainty that, yeah.
That's it. That's when I said, well, I have a hard time trusting the humans, to be on the right track. And that, I mean, that's huge. Like, because I feel like I trust Source and, this is what I say, but then when it comes down to certain specific things, then obviously there must be a blockage in me somewhere, which comes back to this lack of faith, isn't it? Isn't this funny? Isn't it? And what I was thinking about Kumara, the moment where I let go was the moment where I accessed the real perfection behind the whole story and what it was meaning and the invitation. Because, to go back to your word earlier of opportunity, and it's occurring to me when I'm speaking to you that with humans, with people, if I can have that same faith of this very intricate, beautiful, subtle perfection in the contrast of experiences, then yeah, if I can bring that to the fore in me and see the faith that I do have in that, and that I can have that also with humans, whatever is going on and whatever contrast is between me and them. Yeah.
Yeah, because I suppose you could say that the reason that it's harder with humans is because you find it harder for yourself. Because it's like we see the limitations we see outside of ourselves are what's in ourselves, really, isn't it? It's just a kind of mirroring of them.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in the same way as I was able to let go for Kumara, when I am able to let go for humans, am I going to have the same gift of seeing and of information, perhaps? Which, as we remember, it wasn't just about Kumara, it was about my story. That's what you're saying, it's mirror kind of mirror effect.
Yeah,
So that's quite
absolutely.
exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I have to think about that for this situation with
Mm.
this thing about Anna. In a way, it's a bigger thing. It's like for me, like this whole, it's not bigger, but bigger than just that one man's opinion. It's like the whole of the human approach to healing and to like what it's about and what disease is about and what and spirit and what that whole other dimension of God. And yeah, it's kind of like it's like being able to access the potential, I suppose, that's there rather than seeing the where it isn't happening.
Yes. It's like the presence leading to doors that are opening. And the presence being the absence of category and format. Because, of course, each time we focus on something that we think shouldn't be there, or it should be happening in a different way, well, it's just format speaking, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because thinking that there is a right or a wrong way as well. Like, when you said
Yeah.
earlier about that the humans might not be able to figure out the right way or to attune to the right. Maybe there kind of isn't a right way. There's just
No. There's
yeah,
just what is.
there's in a way, any way is the right way because it's always an opportunity. It's just different kind of shades
Yes.
or different